The night was still young, and it was the last night I had, so I headed for the Kowloon club scene. I had changed into my rave gear, hoping to see how the locals let their hair down when they can't quite afford the entrance fee to the China Club. The vocal car wash was just the start. From there on, I was reminded of a multiplex cinema in Las Vegas, with overtones of a London tube station, except that the escalator was working. It was a labyrinth down there, one disco after another, leading on to one cabaret room after another in an endless chain. The joint had everything. Most of the entertainers were expats, hoofing away to pay the rent on their hutches. Down on level 2, the barmen were Australians who had found the ideal setting for their Tom Cruise routines. The Chinese yuppies, known as chuppies, were having a wonderful time. Apparently a lot of them stay down here more or less forever. By the time they take in all the attractions, something new has started up in Gallery 4 off level 3. After wandering for an hour without a glimpse of daylight, I felt a lot more confident about 1997. If the Chinese secret police ever come to check this place out, they'll never re-emerge. By now I was tired and looking for a place to sit down. Help was at hand. A hushed voice ushered me aboard a bong-standard gold Rolls-Royce with the promise that it would take me to a rest area for older people exhausted by too much relaxation. It was a fascinating journey. I had always wondered what happened to the Tiller girls. The roller dropped me off at a promisingly comfortable-looking rest area. A young nurse materialized with a soothing hot towel. She also seemed to be offering me a free nightcap. In my by now fluent Cantonese, I asked her if she could bring me a cup of cocoa. Within seconds, she was back with a bottle of brandy and a quart of vodka. It wasn't what I had asked for, but it would have been bad manners to turn it down. Then a woman arrived with her 2 daughters. They must have been tired too, but it was nice to have company. As far as I could understand our conversation, it was riveting. One of the daughters explained her plans to open a split fingernail clinic, and the other proved to me beyond the shadow of a doubt that she had seen every episode of Charlie's Angels on cable television. They kindly ordered more drinks. Anglo-Chinese relations were looking up. Complimentary food kept arriving. A tired traveler was being made welcome with no thought of cost. I was moved to have discovered, on the eve of my departure, the legendary hospitality of the East. I was equally moved by the bill, which somehow I got stuck with. I couldn't believe the sums of money involved. There were enough zeros to attack Pearl Harbor. I went over the limit on my credit card like a pole vaulter, but I could always phone London and arrange a second mortgage on my house. Back across the harbour, up there in the coruscating buildings, the local whiz kids were on the night shift, still piping the money in through their computers from all over the planet. Perhaps the real, deep appeal of Hong Kong is not so much that it's our last outpost in the East, as that it's turned into a part of the West that works. Even if Hong Kong is finally no more than that, one huge multi-level financial district come shopping mall with amusement arcades and excellent Chinese restaurants, it's still a tremendous achievement. And at the 11th hour, they've even got a measure of democracy. The man responsible for that lives here, in Government House. Back home, there are people who would like Chris Patton to live in 10 Downing Street. He is also said to play a reasonable game of tennis, a possibility I arrived well equipped to test, having been at one stage a promising player myself. I didn't plan to go easy on him. When Patton arrived in Hong Kong, he won a lot of hearts by ditching the traditional plumed hat, easing up on the protocol, and getting out to meet the people. His famously beautiful daughters drove the local media to a frenzy. I couldn't help admiring his relaxed attitude. I just wished that he could be a bit more relaxed about his tennis. With absolutely no regard for a visitor's sensitivity, he beat me 6-love, 6-love, 3-love, and let's have breakfast.
Well, vicious, violent, ruthless tennis player is just about the only thing the Chinese haven't called you, isn't it?
Yes, there's been no criticism yet of my backhand or my cunning drop volleys.
What have they called you? They called you a prostitute, a whore, a triple violator, and...
a man condemned for 1,000 years or for 1,000 generations. You take your pick.
What did you do to get their gate?
Tried to deliver on the promises that had been made to people in Hong Kong. Above all, a steady step-by-step process of democratization. We had months of talks about it, but at the end of the day, we weren't prepared to sell people in Hong Kong down the river and give up our principles. The argument, somebody on the Chinese side said, wasn't that the Chinese wanted us to rig the elections for them. He said it's just that the Chinese like to know the result in advance, which I thought rather gave the game away. And the truth of the matter is, this is a fantastically sophisticated, mature, moderate community. And they've taken the steps towards democracy, which they still don't have, very much in their stride.
Does it get on your nerves, though, that certain elements of the business community or established Chinese here have accused you of provoking the raging beast of China that's about to fall upon us?
I think what is noticeable is that most of those who have been most critical have passports for somewhere else and invariably will have domiciled their firms legally or financially somewhere else. I have to think about the 5.5 million plus people who don't have a passport for anywhere else, and for whom this is home whatever happens. And I think we owe it to them to try to put some panes of glass in the window before we go, so that there's a chance of their values and their way of life being protected.
Doesn't it sometimes occur to you this is a thankless task? It's
a fascinating task. A friend of mine says that it's an impossible job and the trick is to try to make it look possible. I think it may be thankless, but it's important, and it's important to try to do it, I don't want to sound sanctimonious, decently and honourably, because it's the last big colonial job that we've got. And I don't entirely accept that people, whether the Chinese government or the British government, can simply ignore 6 million people. I think China in 1997 will want to take over hearts and minds as well as real estate.
But, you know, on the other hand, they could march in 1997 and turn the place into Tibet if they wanted to. They've done it before. Aren't you really taking a punt? You're making a bet that by 97 they'll have changed.
Well, it's hugely in their interest that this place goes on being successful. There's only one statistic you really need to know about Hong Kong among the many. 6 million people, and they've got an economy which is worth about a quarter of China's. China's the biggest investor here. So China wants it to go on succeeding, and there's also spectacular quantities of Chinese face in showing that they can make it run as well as the wicked colonial repressive British.
Are you going to stay on right to the end?
Yes, I'm going to stay until Highland Cathedral, sunset, bit of Elgar, pipe bands, and it'll be an emotional moment. But God willing, which isn't an attempt to give myself a let-out, it's just a recognition of the Almighty's role in these matters. God willing, I'll be here until the 30th of June, 1997, midnight.
And after that, Government House will have new governors. Everything the British Empire built here will be history. Most of it already is, but it's a history that has left its mark. In the war cemetery at Saiwan Bay, you can see it clearly, understated but indelible. The armed forces of Imperial Japan tried to enslave the whole of the East, including Japan itself. Caught up in the terrible war that raged in Asia and the Pacific, a lot of our people who came out here to fight never went home. They died in a good cause. But if the people in this graveyard were somehow to learn that yet another tyranny was on the way, they would find it hard to rest in peace. One of them is my father, who has lain here now for 50 years. He lived and died under our old empire without ever believing that it was wonderful beyond question. But he thought that it created more than it destroyed, and he was right. The best hope of our last colony is that when the men from the mainland finally take over, they will not try to rewrite history by pretending we were never here. Some of us will always be here. But tiny Hong Kong is just too big an asset to waste. So the chances are that the Beijing bigwigs will leave it alone, take their cut, pay the occasional visit, bet on the occasional horse, and finally, at a banquet thrown for them by Bong and Brenda Chow, propose a toast to Mao Zedong's fading memory. And as for us wicked colonials, well, if we're allowed free access to what we once so blithely assumed was all ours, I, for one, will always go back to Hong Kong. It's got more pace than grace and far more money than sense, but it's alive, and it's alive because it's free. It would be crazy not to be scared of what the boys from Beijing might do, but what fun it would be if it got done to them. And China, after swallowing Hong Kong alive, went down with an incurable case of liberty.